Guys, welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our core data tutorial series, and in this particular tutorial we are going to be taking a look at NSFetchedResultsController. Now, what is NSFetchedResultsController? Well, this class is a core data controller class that allows us to retrieve data from core data in a more optimized manner. Now, the FetchRequest property wrapper in SwiftUI uses this under the hood to retrieve all of our data and then perform any updates that it needs to perform and all that sort of stuff, so we don't have to deal with it directly. But when we are using UIKit or AppKit, we have to work with NSFetchedResultsController directly. So it is very important that you understand how this exactly works. Now, you don't have to use NSFetchedResultsController if you do not want to. If you are perfectly content with managing everything manually on your own, that's fine. But do be aware that NSFetchedResultsController does come with some optimization and performance improvements, as well as, for example, an easier time dealing with sections and stuff like that. So just be aware of that. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Inside of our view controller, we are going to declare a NSFetchedResultsController object, but we're not going to initialize it yet. We will implicitly unwrap it using a exclamation point to tell Swift, hey, we know this is going to need a value, and we will give it a value at some point. So expect there to be one. All right, we'll say var. I'll say frc just to keep it short and simple. We don't want equals. frc colon NSFetchedResultsController. Now, this class requires that we give it, or this type rather, requires that we give it some kind of object as a generic type parameter. Now, this type must be a type that inherits from NS managed object, because if it doesn't, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, seeing as this is a core data thing, right? So what we're going to fetch from our core data store is all of our to-do list items. And you'll see why we're going to do that as we move forward. But we'll say to-do, to-do item, like that. And there is our declaration. Now, let's go into this funcLoadData method here. And what we're going to do here is, in this method, we are going to initialize our FetchedResultsController if it's nil. So if it doesn't have, if it's not initialized yet, we will initialize it with a request and all that sort of stuff. We'll set its sort descriptors and all of that. Then we will perform the initial fetch and reload our table view data. And then if there is a value, we'd simply just perform the fetch and reload our data inside of our table. So what is this going to look like? Well, it's going to look like this. So inside of our load data function, what we'll do is we'll say if frc equals nil. So if it's nil, we want to say frc equals NSFetchedResultsController. And we will take in a couple different parameters for its initializer. So the first thing is a fetch request. Now, this fetch request can be configured in, for example, a data controller class. It can be configured before we initialize our fetch results controller. It can be defined inline using the fetch request static method from our type. However you want to do it. But what we're going to do is we're going to define our fetch request before we finish initializing our fetched results controller. All right. So above our fetched results controller's initialization, we'll say let request equals, and we'll set that to do item dot fetch request. Next, we are going to sort our to-do items. So we'll say request dot sort descriptors equals an array of NS sort descriptor. And then we will give this a sort descriptor object here with the generic type of to-do item. And then we'll give it a key path of title, like that, with an order of forward. So it'll be in ascending order. Now, we will pass the fetch request into our initializer for our fetched results controller. The second parameter that we give it is our managed object context that we want to use to retrieve the data from our core data model or our core data store. Now, I do want to point out again that if you do not have your data controller, if you use one, set up the way that we have it, where we have a single instance that is accessed in various parts of our app, things will get a little bit funky because you're technically then using a different managed object context, and it's just really odd, right? So just keep that sort of stuff in mind when you're dealing with things like this. But what we'll do is for our managed object context, we'll say data controller dot container dot view context. Now, the data controller here is obviously going to be a constant inside of our view controller that goes out to the app delegate and retrieves its data controller constant from there, so we can use it here. Pretty simple stuff. Nothing that we haven't done before, and nothing that you shouldn't already be familiar with. Now, the next thing that we have here, the next parameter, is an optional string, and this is a section name key path. So what this is pretty much is how you want sections to be handled. If this is nil, right? If this is nil, then it won't have individual sections at all. If this does have a value, it will attempt to look at your core data model to see, okay, where does this thing exist that you've hard-coded the string for or whatever, right? So it's a stringified thing. It's not exactly type safe, unfortunately, but that is how we handle sections using NSFetchedResultsController, and we will take a look at that in practice here in a moment, but we're going to leave that as nil for now. Later on we'll look at sections, but we'll leave that as nil for now. So we only display the to-do items. Now, the cache name here is essentially used for caching any fetched results that you get from your core data store, so you don't have to do so many fetches throughout your application's execution. This is especially important if you have large amounts of data that you're fetching. It's less important if you have small amounts of data, but again, with large amounts of data, it's a huge performance boost, right? We'll leave this as nil because we're not going to deal with caching. But if you want to deal with caching, I urge you to read the documentation on how that works. All right, so there is our fetched results controller. And the last thing that we need to do is, after we've initialized our fetched results controller, we will do a do try frc dot perform fetch, and we'll do a catch. We'll print error dot localized description, and then right after we perform the fetch on our fetched results controller, we will simply say table view dot reload data. Now, why didn't I put this in an else block? Well, the reason why I didn't do that is because this should be executed every time the method is called anyway, right? So we're doing that outside of its condition, outside of a conditional block, to make sure that it gets executed every single time load data gets called. All right. Let's see here. All right. Okay. So with that, let's make sure that we do have an exclamation point up here. Okay. Okay, there we go. That's why I'm getting that warning. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is we need to actually populate our table view control. So how do we do this? Well, it's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to with the table view. All right. So down here at the bottom of my file here, we're going to first define the number of sections of our table view. And we can do that by saying number of sections. So func number of sections. And what we're going to return is frc dot sections. Now, sections is a property on our fetch results controller that is an array of let's see here, of NS section info. NS fetched results section info, right? So with that, what we're going to do here is this is going to have that we're going to use nil coalescing here dot count nil coalescing 0. Okay, so what are we doing here? Well, what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, get the number of sections that our fetched results controller has, and if it if sections is nil for whatever reason, then return 0. Otherwise, return the number of sections that the fetched results controller has. Pretty simple stuff so far. It's a little bit different, again, than what you would do normally. All right. Next, we need the number of rows in any given section. So number of rows in section. This is slightly different again. And in here, what we'll say is we will return FRC dot sections sections at the given section dot number of objects. Otherwise, we'll say 0. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, get all of the sections from our fetch results controller, and then get the specific section at the given index that we're section index that we're given with this data source method, and then return the number of sections, or number of objects rather, that are associated with that section, as long as it's not nil. Otherwise, if this expression does evaluate to nil, we will return 0. All right. Now, the last method that we're going to use from our data source, at least for now, is the cell for row at. Now, this is going to be slightly different than what you're used to, but the rest of it will be familiar. So we'll say cell for row at. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to retrieve the specific to-do list item that we want this particular cell to represent. And our fetch results controller has a specific method for retrieving that object from a given index path, right? So you see how in our cell for row at we get an index path? Well, we're going to use that here. So that way our fetch results controller knows, oh, okay, we want this specific item from this specific section. We'll say let item equals FRC dot object at index path. Now this will return a to-do item because of the generic type parameter we gave our NSFetchedResultsController. We'll give it the index path that we have. And then finally, we just move on like normal. So guard let cell equals table view dot DQ reusable cell with identifier to do item cell dot reuse identifier for index path as a to do item cell, else we simply want to return a UI table view cell instance that is blank. Then we want to call our set method. So cell set. We'll give it our item there, just like that. And then return cell. Now, you should know how to do that already. It's basic table view code, nothing too complex there. All right. And that's it for now. Let's go ahead and save this and run our code. Okay, we have a build failure. Okay. So let's go ahead and add that optional chaining there, rather. Okay, then we can save it and run it. There we go. Now it works. And here is our application. Now you can see our navigation controller's title is to-do lists, and that's intentional. But inside of our table here, we can see we have all of our to-do list items, and they are organized by their titles, right, in ascending order. However, this isn't great. We want our to-do items to be sorted in their different sections, and then we want our sections to be sorted. Right? So how do we do that? Well, to do this, what we need to do is we need to use that section name key path parameter from our NSFetchedResultsController, and then modify our sort descriptor just slightly. And you'll see why here in a moment. But let's first change that one singular parameter of our FetchedResultsController's initializer. So I'm going to go all the way back up here. Okay. So where we have section name key path, let's go ahead and give that a set of double quotes. And this has to be very precise. So what do you want the section to be based on? Well, we want our sections to be based on the title, or rather, yeah, we want this to be based on the titles for our lists that each to-do item belongs to. So for the section names, there'll be list dot title. Now again, this is stringified. It's not type safe, but it's how it's done here. I wish it was different, but whatever. So now what we're going to see when we run our code is we're going to see our data is indeed split into different sections based on the to-do lists. But there's a couple small problems. One, we don't have titles for each section. So we can solve that pretty easily by overriding a delegate method. The other problem is that you'll find different to-do items that are in different sections that it doesn't belong in. And that is where our sort descriptor modification will come in. Right? So what we're going to do first is we're going to add the section titles, because that'll be a little bit simpler to grasp at first. So we'll go ahead and go to the bottom of our file again. And we will say title for header. All right. Title for header in section. What we're going to do is we will return the frc dot sections question mark section dot name. And then if this expression evaluates to nil, we will say untitled, like that. Okay? Now we can run our code. Now we can see to-do list 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But again, you can see it's not great. The to-do items are not sorted correctly. Nothing is sorted correctly like it should, and it's just not great. So how then do we sort these properly to make sure that all of the items remain in the sections they belong to? Well, if we go back up to the top of our file, go to our load data method, inside of our sort descriptor, for our key path, instead of sorting them by the title of the to-do items, we're going to sort them by the title of the list that they belong to. .list.title. Save that, run it. And here it is. So we have to-do list 1. And so now we have all the to-do list items that belong to each section in their proper sections. Now, let's say you wanted to not use the sort descriptor object from Foundation and instead use a different initializer for NSSortDescriptor. Well, that's completely fine. So we can say request dot sort descriptors equals, say, NS sort descriptor, and we can give it, say, a key, and the key is going to be a stringified representation of what we want to sort things by. So much like we had for our section name key path, it'll be list.title. And then we'll have an ascending Boolean set to true. Save it, run it. Build successfully. And then you can see, again, everything's sorted properly. You can also use the key path parameter of NSSortDescriptor. We can say key path backslash to do item dot list dot title. Save and run. Okay. Okay. We want ascending. There we go. Save that. Run it. And again. Everything works exactly as intended. All right. So with that, that pretty much does it for this video, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.